Shields. They're an often overlooked aspect in Star Trek Online, mainly because they have so many weaknesses. But what happens when you're able to build up those weaknesses to make a really strong ship? Well, that's when you get a defensive powerhouse like the one I have built here today. So, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between, let me introduce you to my shield capacity build featuring the Dauntless 2 Command Science Dreadnought. First things first, I should probably explain why I'm using this particular ship, because not any ordinary ship is going to be able to run this build. You need a very specific sort of ship. That being, science ships with as high as shield modifier as possible, and preferably with a command layout. And the Dauntless 2 fits that perfectly. Admittedly, the Protostar also has a 1.6 shield modifier, same with the Dauntless, but however, it does not have any command seating, and it is more geared towards stew-size setups, which are even more difficult to build for than straight top-size setups, and honestly, I'm kind of unfamiliar with how to build one of them, so yeah, I picked Dauntless 2. Anyway, if you look at the forward weapon slots, if I fix that up, in my forward weapon slots, I've just got a bunch of torpedoes that function best underneath torpedo high yield, since I am using concentrate firepower in this build. So I'm running the enhanced bimolecular photon torpedo, the gravimetric photon torpedo, the Delphic distortion photon torpedo. Actually, is it a photon? Actually, I think it's a quantum. Anyway, and the particle emission plasma torpedo. All of these deal a lot of damage underneath high yields, and plus I'm also running some special warheads on this build, which allows them to deal even more damage under high yield. And in my after weapons, I've just got usual thorium infused quantum mines because they're the best sort of mines you can really get. For my core gear, things are looking very different. For my deflector, impulse, and warp core, I'm actually using the set from Incontrovertible Defenses, which comes from, I think it's the Melting Pot mission in New Frontiers arc. Yeah, Melting Pot. The reason why I've got these here is because apart from their very shield up related bonuses, especially on the deflector, like 63.8 Starship shield capacity, that is wild. The 3-piece bonus of it gives you an extra 40% to maximum shield capacity, which is the biggest out of any set bonus within the game. In my secondary deflector, I'm using a resonating secondary deflector to buff my shield resistance, but not any resonating secondary deflector. I'm actually using one from the Fleet Colony, because with those ones you can sneak in a 3rd shield capacity modifier in there. For my shields, there are actually a couple of options you can do. If you used to play the game like really far back, you might have access to the Paratronic Shield Array. If you didn't play that mission before it got removed, then you wouldn't be able to gain access to it. But I am using the Reman Advanced Prototype Covariant Shield Array, which you can get from the New Romulus Reputation. The reason why I'm using this particular shield is, apart from it being the highest capacity shield within the reputation system, it also has a proc where there's a 10% chance when you get attacked by directed energy weapons, you gain 5% maximum shield capacity for 30 seconds, which can stack up to 10 times. Admittedly, it's a proc, but hey, it builds up enough. Now, there is another option for this, not the Paratronic or the Riemann Advanced Prototype Shield Array, but the hypercapacitor shield array, which you can get by leveling up your R&D menus to level 15. As you can see, I have not been keeping up with my research skills, but once you get to level 15, you're able to craft the hypercapacitor shield array. The reason why I'm not using it on this build is, apart from me not being able to craft them, once you upgrade them, once you even get them, you can't re-engineer them, which means getting one with perfect capacity nodes is damn near impossible. And the closest I saw on the exchange was going for the price of a promo ship, which is, kind of ridiculous. So, yep, Merriment Advanced Prototype Shield Array does suit my needs very well. In my after weapon, I've already went after the after weapons. In my device slots, first I've got Subspace Field Modulator for its bonus and for its damage resistance rating and defense rating. The Nimbus Pirate Distress Call from the old Installation 18 story arc. You can actually access this from the Available tab. I'm running Deuterium Surplus for speed buffs because I'm not running it with competitive engines. Reactive Arm Catalyst for the heals, and Kobayashi Move Transporter for random buffs, which also includes 20% maximum shield capacity. In my Universal consoles, first I've got Temporal Disentanglement Suite, which I'm pretty sure comes from the Butterfly mission in the Iconian War arc. And what this basically does, Butterfly War, what this does is give you a buff stick crit chance and shield capacity. It gives you buff auxiliary power levels, and crit chance, crit severity, shield resistance, maximum shield capacity, and auxiliary power level. Basically, everything that I want on this build, this thing can do. Next, I've got an exotic particle field exciter. This is crafted run with the shield HP modifier, because once you get a shield HP modifier on this, you gain a 52.4% maximum shield capacity buff from this. In my engineering console, I've got a conductive RCS accelerated shield HP modifier to buff my turn rate and my shield capacity. This one actually has the highest out of any engineering shield capacity buff in the game. In my engineering console, it's not something that buffs my shield capacity directly, but it actually does really help out the build. Dominion Defense Screen. What this does, it gives you extra crit chance and crit severity as your passive, which is always handy. But when you click this, it ramps up your shield resistance rating by a crap ton. Especially on this build in particular, this thing was able to tank a shot from D-jump with only like 40% bullet rate, which is just absolutely crazy. In my science consoles, I'm using a bunch of field generators, mainly a mix of Bellum and Pax field generators. I would like to be able to swap these all over the Bellums because those will buff my crit chance a bit more, but I didn't have all the dilithium necessary to get rid of all of these. In my tactical consoles, I've got the breeze screen, which again doesn't buff shield capacity, but however, how this thing works is basically like ramming speed. But when you activate it, it gives you an immunity shield on you, which is able to block physical and kinetic damage, which the amount it can absorb is 5 times your forward shield capacity, which is already crazy. However, when you ram something, all the remaining immunity shield gets turned into damage to that enemy you just rammed. And this thing can build up damage to a crazy amount. I had this thing get a hit of 16 million. What the crazy part is? That's not even the highest that apparently people managed to get it to. I've had people who claim they've managed to get this thing up to 60 million by bugging up the console, which is just hilarious. Next, I got the piezoelectric focuser, which gives me a 19.7% maximum shield capacity buff and a bonus 15% turn rate. Subspace Fraction Tunneling Field, which is here on most of my builds, but the reason why I've got it on this build is because I do not have access to unconventional systems because I just don't have the room for them. So I need something to cool down to breeze screen and the DPR room here, which is on here for you always. So, yep, Subspace Fraction Tunneling Field happens. Now, my hangar bay, you might expect me to run with the Type 7s for the debuff, but however, these things, the armored shield repair units, these things are very surprising because what these do, and I'm not going to launch them because I'll get into that in a moment, what these things do is they just hang around your ship and they just heal up your shields, and they heal them up for a significant amount. I think there's like 4,000 shields per second once they get fully ramped up. However, when you use these things, there are a few things you've got to take aware of. First of all, these things are very slow. On this build in particular, you can't go above half impulse without these things lagging behind. And these things are very buggy as well. Like sometimes when they get destroyed and they get relaunched, they just don't exist. I can select them, but it just doesn't exist. And also sometimes they'll do a little animation that should show when they're applying shields to you, but they just won't heal your shields. So whilst these things are very temperamental and very good to my build, if they're making this build and they prove to be too problematic, I just recommend using the Type 7s. For my skills, things are a little different. First of all, I respect my skill tree to be the same as it usually is, except with one difference. All of my whole capacity things, they're now in shields. You don't need to do this necessarily, I just did this for the theme. For my strats, first I've got Miracle Worker as the primary to gain access to reflexive emitters. When I'm affected by a shield drain, I can gain shield regeneration and shield capacity. And Strategist secondary for it is just straight up 10% maximum shield capacity buff. In my traits, first everything's running a bit different. First I've got a Good Day to Die, which is here for why I always have it here, go down fighting buff. Shield Analyst for the 10% maximum shield capacity buff. Rogue Scientist aboard. You've seen this one on a couple of my builds now. Every minute this thing has a chance to trigger either Emergency Power to Shields one, that one is the main one, Attack Pattern Omega 1, or Torpedo Spread 1. The thing is, this thing can trigger when Rogue Scientist board uses its emergency power to shields. It'll activate pretty much every ability also tied into emergency power to shields, but it won't trigger the associated cooldowns. So when Rogue Scientist board triggers emergency power to shields, I can just trigger emergency power to shields again to get double most of the buffs, and I'm good to go. I've got Oblique Shielding, which gives you damage resistance rating based on my shield percent. Fleet Coordinator for the bonus damage, which stacks on how many are in my team. Resonating Payload Modification for the physical and kinetic damage resistance rating debuff. Hot Pursuit to buff to chase into my mines. Wing Commander to allow my shield repair units to level up faster, which, fairly thing, on these things specifically, once they level up, they heal your shields even more. Inspirational Leader, which gives me a buff chance to activate, which gives, geez, I cannot speak today, I need coffee. This thing has a chance whenever I activate any bridge officer ability, which it'll grant me 10% amongst my starship skills for 15 seconds, which includes shield capacity. Not inspirational leader, intelligence agent attaché, which can restore my captain's abilities whenever I get a critical hit, and superior projectile training for the bonus projectile weapon damage. In my starship traits, I've also got improved photonic officer for my cooldown management and to buff my shield and hull healing, as well as my exotic damage. Enhanced power condensers, which comes from the Breen Resurrect, which is a epic Phoenix ship, but if you've completed the event, you'll also have this. Whenever I activate Tachyon Beam or Energy Siphon, it gives me maximum shield capacity and maximum power. However, this thing does have a 30-second lockout, so do keep that in mind. Next, I've got Subspatial Warheads. It's pretty much here whenever I'm running Concentrate Firepower because of the massive amount of damage those anomalies can cause. Rapid response shielding from the Voth Bastille. Whenever I decloak or activate emergency power shields, the latter being the only one I can activate on this build, I gain 25% maximum shield capacity, plus 50% Starship exotic particle generators, and plus 50% Starship drain expertise. Vanguard shield shaping, which comes from this ship. Whenever I activate a torpedo or an exotic bridge officer ability, I gain buffed my forward shield capacity and my kinetic damage. Trauma response, which comes from the Nobel Miracle Worker Science Vessel. That's in the Sea Store. Whenever I heal myself, I gain a buff of trauma response, which can buff my shield capacity and shield healing. And finally, shield overload from the Sagittarius Temporal Cruiser. Whilst this doesn't buff shield capacity, this thing gives me a crap ton of damage resistance and shield resistance whenever it activates. However, those effects will drop off every 5 seconds, so do keep that in mind. In my space reputation, first I'm running Auxiliary Power Configuration Defense for its maximum shield capacity buff. Advanced Targeting System for the crit severity buff, Precision for the crit chance buff, Torpedo Pre-Fire Sequence for the bonus torpedo damage and the extra flight speed to my destructible torpedoes, and Enhanced Shield Systems for the maximum shield capacity buff. In my bridge officer stations, in my lieutenant's seat, and I'm using a science seat, I've got Science Team 1 and Transfer Shield Strength 2 to buff up trauma response. In my Ensign Universal seat, Science Team 1 here as well, because you can flip-flop between the two of them. In my Lieutenant Commander Tactical seat, first I'm using Chemosite Lace Weaponry to buff my projectiles and to do a bit more radiation damage. Mine Dispersal Pattern Beta, which will buff my mines to launch in a radius. And Torpedo High Yield 3, because more high yields are always good. In my Lieutenant Commander Engineering seat, which is also a temporal seat, I'm running Emergency Power Engines 1 to buff my speed and also to trigger the Emergency Con Hologram. Emergency Power Shields 2, which, well, this is a shield build, this is going to be a given. And a Reverse Shield Polarity 2, which is really good on this build, especially because if you're taking too much fire and your shields start dropping down, you can just activate this and it'll just go right back up again. In my Commander Science / Command seat, first I'm running Tachyon Beam 1 to trigger Enhanced Power Condensers, Photonic Officer 1 for my cooldowns and to trigger Improved Photonic Officer, Concentrate Firepower here to buff my torpedoes, get more high yields out of them, and Gravity Well 3 just to group up my enemies a bit easier. In my duty officers, see if I can get to it right. First, I'm running a Emergency Con Hologram, which allows me to get evasive maneuvers up faster. I've got 2 projectile weapons officers, which will reduce the recharge time of my torpedoes, since I'm not using ceaseless momentum on this build. I've got a fabrication engineer here, which increases the duration of reverse shield polarity. If I could. Okay, come on. Seriously, game, you can't do that. I can't show the stats of him. There we go. 8 seconds. Impulsive by 8 seconds. And I've got 2 flight deck officers because the armored shield repair units, those are actually counted as not fighters. The middle one, I'll put it up on the screen. But anyway, their recharge time is abysmally slow, so you need someone to keep those back up again. Now, you may be wondering, what is your shield capacity right now? And I'm glad you asked, because right now, I've got 107,000 shields in each facing, which wasn't even the craziest thing. That's nowhere near the maximum amount of shields that can be made, because apart from the fact that I have not completed my endeavors, my shield capacity is up there, but it's nowhere near the top. there's also two other traits that I didn't talk about that do buff shield capacity. First is Precision Scrap, which comes from Jovian Intel Heavy Raider. That's the 32nd century ship from Titan we see in the Star Trek Discovery. And that thing basically acts like the Kobayashi Maru whenever you use Tractor Beam. It gives you random buffs, which one of them can include shield capacity. And the other one I didn't include, mainly because I absolutely hate how it works. Turtle, which comes from the Zenkethi Razbej battlecruiser. Whenever I'm at 25% or below on my throttle, I gain buffs to my shield capacity and shield resistance. However, this thing is painfully slow, even ignoring the fact that I had to be below a quarter of my speed to activate it, which is just stupid. So yeah, I'm not using those things for a reason. But, however, there are a couple more things that you could do. First of all, these are the fleet skill buffs. These ones you can get through your fleet starbase down over in your requisitions area. And especially the 10% science skills, that will improve your shield capacity by a great 3%. Yeah, I'm really scraping the bottom of the barrel to try to buff my shield capacity. And another thing here, the increased maximum shields long thing. I'm not sure what. Damn it, Stowe, why do you have to give this such a complicated name? Anyway, you get this from the Competitive Reputation store. You just open it up here, and it's under long. And yeah, here it is. Now, these things are supposed to be only be able to be used in PvP. However, you can actually just warp into Karat, which is down over in the Borov sector. Just activate this, and then just warp out before the local PvPers annihilate you. Because once you activate this, this buff stays with you no matter where you go for 15 seconds. You don't have to be in the PvP map for this thing to take effect. So, yep, there you go. Anyway, I'm going to take you for a run of IC, and I'll show you the pass, and Hi, future me here. I wasn't actually able to get a good run of an ISC because I had incredibly bad luck with my teammates. Yeah, they just keep bringing in 10k, 20k DPS ships and just drag the TFO on forever, which, if you're doing that much damage in an elite TFO, you should not be doing elite. You need to work on your damn builds because you're dragging everything down and just... Anyway, they just kept dragging runs on forever, and I wasn't able to good one. So I'm just going to take this thing through an advanced Jupiter Dauntless, and I'll show you the recording and pass from that.
The recent conflict at Jupiter Station was tactical concern. Today's simulation is one of the first steps toward addressing it. Assessing the performance.
Prepare for battle. Enemy swarming in near projection station Alpha. We have multiple openings, Star.
Containment breach! Evacuating all personnel!
Solid bucket. Recon in space.
110k, which you may think is a little low, but there's two things you got to remember about this build. Well, first of all, Jupiter Gauntlet isn't actually a DPS map, and things like ICs, so I was able to actually get a good recording of before I finished the build. I was getting like 200, 220k out of this thing. And second thing is this build is I just invested a lot of defense into this build, so I'm not going to be able to buff my offensive stats very much. So basically, I'm sacrificing a lot of my damage for the theme of the build. As we go into the analysis, we see that the most amount of my damage came from Debris Screen, which did 47k DPS, and had a max one hit of 4 million, which is freaking wild. Underneath that, I had an enhanced biomolecular photon torpedo underneath a high yield 1, and then the particle emission plasma under high yield 1. The quantum mines doing the same things they usually do, 7k DPS. Gravity well did 4. But if you look into my damage taken, I actually took in just over 2 million damage from there, which is a lot of damage, most of which went through my shields. I almost got overwhelmed at the end there because I was mistiming my reverse shield polarity. I should have saved it up for the end fight, but I panic hit it on the third phase. Most of my healing output came from the armored shield repair units, which did about 2,000 healing per second, which is pretty decent for little hang-up heads. And from my healing input, most of it came from the biomolecular shield generator. So, that was my shield capacity build on the Dauntless 2 Command Science Dreadnought. I'm having a lot of fun flying the ship around, even if it is just to obliterate things at debris screen. Plus, this thing is an absolutely defensive powerhouse. So, let me know what you think of this build. Remember to like, subscribe, you know the drill, this is YouTube, But it really does help me out, and I do want to get monetized soon. Check out my socials down below. I've moved over to Blue Sky now because I don't want to be going on Twitter now, so yeah, go and follow me if you're there. Anyway, have an amazing rest of your day, and until next time, keep having fun, and I'll catch you later. Goodbye!